Hourly, by the piece, full day rate. How do tattoo artists actually charge? Here's the full breakdown. How do tattoo artists actually price their work? If you're a client, you've probably seen a huge range of pricing, from $80 minimums to $3,000+ day rates, and wondered why. And if you're a tattoo artist, you might still be figuring out what way makes the most sense to charge for you and your client, and if you're charging too much or too little. So in this video, I'm going to break down the various ways tattoo artists charge: hourly, day rate, flat rate by the piece, and the pros and cons of each. Then we'll dive into what actually affects tattoo pricing: experience, time, demand, even location. Finally, we'll talk about the real value of the tattoo and give you some real-world examples of what some artists are charging and why. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with the three main ways artists price their work. You typically have hourly, flat rate by the piece, or a full day rate. Now, each of these have their pros and cons. Different artists charge differently because of what works specifically for them, their style, their clientele, and their own personal workflow. Now, first, we're going to start with the one that's easiest to understand, maybe the one that's been most common, at least historically. This is the hourly rate. It's pretty simple. How long the tattoo takes is how much it costs. Now, this can be anywhere from $100 to $500 or more, depending on the artist. To complicate things a little bit more though, some artists start the clock only when they're tattooing on your skin. Some start it when you walk in the door and you're working on the design. It varies a bit from artist to artist. Now, some artists charge what we call a modified hourly rate. That's basically where the first hour is a little bit higher and it acts as a minimum. So for example, an artist might charge a minimum of $250 for the first hour and then $150 for every hour after that. This is sometimes used to offset supply costs or the design time it takes for multiple smaller tattoos. So the pros: this is easy to understand for the artist and the client, and it's pretty fair. The more time the tattoo takes, the more it costs. Now the cons: a lot of artists have ditched the hourly rate because they don't like feeling constrained to finish a tattoo in a specific amount of time. There's so many variables that go into tattooing, and sometimes things just take a little bit longer or you finish a little bit quicker. And if you get more efficient and faster at tattooing over time, sometimes you'll finish the same piece with the same quality of work in less hours, and that would result in making less money. And from the client side of things, there's also some uncertainty there. You might come into a tattoo session not knowing exactly how much something is going to cost. You might not know what to budget for, or you might stress out during the session if the tattoo is taking a little bit longer. So the next one is flat rate by the piece. This is when an artist provides a specific quote for a specific tattoo based on details, size, design, etc. And obviously, in most situations, the amount of time a tattoo takes is going to factor into this. Now the pros: this can be really effective for tattoo artists who do a lot of flash or pre-mades, or custom designs when they're really accurate at estimating how long it's going to take. A lot of artists will use this to discount their normal rates, especially for pre-made or flash designs. Now, this is nice for the artist and the client because you don't have to watch the clock and you know exactly what to expect. It's simple: one price, no surprises. Now, the cons are that there are a lot of variables that go into how time-consuming or how difficult a specific tattoo is going to be, like how well is the client's skin taking ink or how well are they sitting. This also creates a little bit more work for the artist in the pre-tattoo process because you're going to have to provide an estimate for every specific ink. Now, as we all know, sometimes during the consultation or design process, various elements of the piece like design, subject matters, or placement can change. So all these things can change the estimate based on the factors we mentioned before. This can also be a difficult conversation to have with the client if their tattoo is going to be a little bit more expensive when they come in. Now, this last rate is becoming a lot more common among experienced tattoo artists and collectors. When I get tattooed, it's personally how I prefer the artist to charge. We also do a lot of these here at Eden, and that's the flat day rate or half day rate. Now, this is where instead of charging by the hour, the artist charges a flat rate for the whole day you spend with them, regardless on the actual time the tattoo takes. Most of the time, it's going to be a range like 6 to 10 hours, and the rates can range anywhere from $1,000 to even $5,000 or more. Artists that do a half day rate can sometimes charge a little bit more than half the cost of their full day rate to account for the supplies and design time involved with multiple smaller tattoos. Now the pros: I personally love this, and I know artists that love it too because it removes that time anxiety. The client knows exactly what they're paying, and the artist can focus on the tattoo without running the clock in the back of their minds. For the artist, it's a lot easier to give a more accurate estimate because you're giving yourself a wider range, normally in days instead of hours. Now, the downsides to this are a lot of clients aren't really used to this yet, and they might not fully understand it. Sometimes they can feel shortchanged if the tattoo takes a little bit less time. It also sounds a lot more expensive upfront if you're not considering what goes into a full day session. But for large scale work and tattoo collectors, a lot of times this can end up being a better deal overall. Also for artists, sometimes you can be put in a weird spot if you don't quite finish a tattoo and you need maybe an hour or two instead of another full day. So to account for these factors, a lot of times an artist will use this in combination with a half day or a full day rate. Like they'll charge $200 an hour or $1,200 for a full day session, anything more than 6 hours. Now, if you're an artist, how should you charge? The reality is that any of these ways work. It really just comes down to what you personally prefer, what you're most comfortable with, and what your clients are most comfortable with. For clients, just know that every artist works a little bit differently. try focusing on what the total cost of the tattoo is going to be rather than how the artist calculates that. All right, so now that we've covered different pricing methods, let's talk about what actually affects the price of a tattoo. Now, pricing isn't just about how big the tattoo is or how long it takes. There are a lot of less visible factors that go into how a tattoo is priced. Now, at the end of the day, this isn't something that you're buying off the shelf. It's art, and art is subjective. That means the same tattoo is going to be worth a different price to different clients. But here are some of the factors that go into how much an artist charges. So the first is the experience level. An artist that's just starting out might charge $100 an hour, whereas an artist that's been tattooing 10 years or more might charge $300 or more an hour. Just like in other industries, people should be getting paid more for their job if they're doing better work and they're more efficient. Now, second is demand. When an artist reaches a certain point in their career, they literally don't have enough time in their calendar to tattoo everybody that wants to get tattooed by them. A lot of artists can only do one tattoo a day. For Deanna, a lot of her pieces take 3 to 4 days. Now, this can even vary by style with the same artist. For example, if you're an artist that specializes in fine line tattoos, the demand for that might be high. But if you decide you want to try a full color realism back piece, the demand for that is going to be a lot lower, or maybe even zero. This can also vary between artist to artist within the same style. Some people that tattoo black and gray realism are a lot faster or slower depending on the techniques they use specifically. Now, if an artist is booked out months in advance and they're getting way more inquiries than they can handle, they can and should raise their rates. Now, if you're a client and an artist's rates seem high to you, that might just mean that the market is a little bit higher on the value than you are personally. And that's okay. Again, it's all subjective. Style is also a big factor. The amount of detail in a specific piece can affect the time it takes to do a tattoo. For example, a color realism tattoo is generally going to take a lot more time than a fine line tattoo. Now, because of all this, I'm a little hesitant to say size should be a factor in how much a tattoo costs. You can have a 3-inch tattoo that's fine line script and a 3-inch tattoo that's micro realism. One can take 10 minutes, one can take 8 hours. And finally, market and location. What an artist charges in a small town might be a little different than what someone charges in a major city. Rent, cost of living, market saturation, that all plays into it. For example, if you're the only artist in your town that does color realism at a high level, you might charge a little bit more because the demand is going to be higher. Or you might charge a little bit less because the cost of living and average wages are lower. Whereas, and if you're in a big city like New York, people are a lot more accustomed to paying higher prices, but there's also more competition. So if you're comparing the prices between two artists, all of these things might play a factor in how much an artist charges. So now that we've talked a little bit about what affects the cost, let's zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture on the value of a tattoo. And like I said before, this is tough because this is all subjective. But no matter how much it's priced or how it's priced, you're not only paying for the time the artist is putting ink into your skin. You're paying for everything that went into that moment. For example, the time it takes to design. A lot of artists can spend countless hours finding references and putting together a design before they tattoo it. A lot of times, that's going to be unpaid work. We're also paying for the cost of the supplies and even all the costs that go into running a business, like marketing, staff, even rent and utilities. There's also the time spent fielding the inquiry to get the client booked, whether the artist is doing that themselves or they have a staff to help them. If you had a consultation beforehand, that's normally free as well, but again, it takes time. You're also paying for a service and an experience. A good artist or studio is going to put a ton of time and effort into making sure your experience there is memorable and positive. And here's the biggest thing. You're not just paying for the time it takes to do a tattoo. You're paying for the years of experience, education, dedication to the craft, trial and error, ups and downs that have gone into making that artist be able to do the tattoo they do on you in the time it takes. There's so much more that goes into a tattoo besides just the time the actual tattoo takes. So if it seems expensive, it is. The other thing to remember is that this is a very permanent form of art that you're going to have for the rest of your life. You can't take it back, you can't exchange it. If you want to remove it, it's going to take you years and hundreds to thousands of dollars. So here's my very important message to clients. You're absolutely entitled to put your own value on a tattoo, just like any art form or anything else you can buy. But before you bargain shop or write off a tattoo artist as too expensive, consider everything that goes into that sticker price. Now also consider that this is a very big decision and a very permanent purchase. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into some real world examples of how some artists charge and how much they charge. All right, so we've gathered a few tattoos from some of our artists here at Eden and also taken some submissions for artists online. So if you submitted, thank you so much for that. So for each tattoo submitted, I'm gonna break down what kind of tattoo it is, how much it cost, how long it took, and why it might be that price based on everything we just talked about. All right, so this was a tattoo done by one of our Eden resident artists, Ash. She's been tattooing for about 4 years, and as you can see, she is incredibly talented. She just moved here from LA a couple months ago, so she's still working on building up her clientele and her speed with tattooing. But this piece specifically was a color realism corgi. For this one, she charged an hourly rate of $150 and it took 6 hours for a total of $900. Now, in my opinion, this piece is an absolute steal. Ash is new to tattooing and new to the city, so she doesn't quite have a large clientele built up just yet. And her rates reflect that, but they definitely don't reflect the quality of work. I've seen tattoo artists tattooing for more than 10 years that could never do anything like this. Okay, so the next example was done by one of our Eden resident artists, Monica. She's been tattooing for about 8 years, and she's been here at Eden since we opened. She normally charges a flat rate for full or half day, but she normally provides a discount for her pre-made designs. So this one was a pre-made and she took 2 days, about 14 hours total. She charged a flat rate of $2,000 for this. So to me, the size, style, expertise involved with this one makes it absolutely a steal of a deal. I mean, seriously, just look at that color saturation. It's incredible. And for Monica, she got to do a great portfolio piece on an amazing client, so it's worth discounting. Now, the last of our Eden artists is going to be Cass, and this is a full sleeve they've been working on. Now, Cass is a perfect example of how you don't necessarily need to be tattooing a long time to do incredible work. They've been tattooing just about 3 years. We've had to close their books because they just get so many inquiries. So for this one, they charge $1,400 a day. It took 5 sessions for a total of $7,000. Took about 35 hours total. So I also know that there are a ton of hours that went into this design specifically behind the scenes. But this is another smash value, especially because Cass's rates are probably going to go up soon. They're so far advanced for their rate and their experience level. Okay, so now that we've gone through our Eden artists, we're going to get into some of the artist submissions that we received online. So if you submitted, thanks again. We got a ton of them, so I'm only going to get to a few, but we really appreciate it. So this first one is from Barbara. She's a tattooer out in Los Angeles. Now this piece specifically took about 5 hours and it was $1,300. That's about $250 an hour if you're keeping track. I think that's a really good price for this one. Barbara's been tattooing for 10 years, so she's a really experienced tattoo artist. I also know that rates can be a little bit higher in Los Angeles because of the clientele there. But this one specifically, it looks like she's getting a lot of those peppery textures in there with the 3-round liner, which is very, very time consuming and takes a lot of skill. So amazing tattoo. I think really fair price on this one. All right, now this little chrome rubber ducky was done by Clean. He's a tattoo artist in Chicago. He's been tattooing for about 3 years. He said this one cost $600, took him about 3 hours. This is another really good example of how the size doesn't necessarily affect how difficult or how time consuming a tattoo is gonna be. Those chrome details, all those reflections, that's gonna take a lot of time, and this is something that's very specialized. You've gotta be a really skilled artist to pull this off. So $200 an hour might seem a little bit high for an artist that's been tattooing 3 years, but again, this is a great example of how the time an artist has been tattooing isn't necessarily always going to reflect their skill level. Looks like Clean is off to a great start. I would be super happy if I was a client and I paid $600 for this piece. All right, so this one is from Julia from Norway. She sent in this kind of color realism, mixed style, neo-traditional skull and rose mashup. It's a fucking awesome piece. She said she's been tattooing for about 5 years, and her normal day rate, which she charged for this piece, is about $1,200 US per day. Now this piece is absolutely insane, and it's a massive piece. I know a lot of artists that would take at least 2 full day sessions to do something like this. So again, that's an absolute steal of a price. I would be so stoked if I was a client and I paid $1,200 US for this piece. Really incredible work. All right, so hopefully those real world examples give you a better ballpark of what some artists are charging. So if you're a tattoo artist trying to figure out how much to charge, or a client that's trying to understand why prices can vary so much, hopefully this video gave you a clearer picture of how tattoo pricing actually works. There's really no model that's one size fits all, but the best artists charge intentionally based on the quality of work, the time and experience they're giving to the client. So if you're an artist, hopefully you take away this. Your pricing shouldn't just reflect the time it took to do a specific tattoo, but everything it took to get there. Now, if you're a client, paying for a high quality piece of art isn't just about the tattoo. It's about supporting the artist, their process, and their craft. Now, if you want to see more breakdowns like this in the future, or if you want your work featured in a video, follow us on Instagram so you can submit your tattoos. And don't forget to subscribe for more real conversations about tattooing, business, and building a career in this industry. Dunzo.